Welcome to Mindful with Minaa, where we explore how mindfulness can enhance your relationships and well-being. I'm your host, Minaa B, a licensed social worker, mental health educator, and author. Through insightful discussions, I will guide you towards self-awareness and self-efficacy, empowering you to effectively manage your relationships, reduce burnout, and be more present with yourself. So let's jump into today's episode. What's up, Mindful community? So before I jump into today's episode, I want to share that I am going to be leading a retreat from November 15th through the 17th in Boone, North Carolina at the Art of Living Retreat Center. This is going to be a wonderful weekend experience that you do not want to miss. During this time, I am going to be giving you all of the tools that you need to learn when it comes to building community. The power of developing emotional regulation, the importance of co-regulation, the importance of recognizing how to foster deeper connections, and most importantly, it's going to be an opportunity for you to tap into self-discovery so that you can have a deeper understanding of yourself, a deeper understanding of your desires, and the things that you need to feel supported so that you can learn to bridge self-care to community care. Right now, friendships are suffering, relationships are suffering, people themselves are suffering, and this is just going to be an awesome opportunity for you to connect with yourself, but also connect with other people. So all of the information for this retreat is going to be in the description box. So when you're done listening to this episode, please head over to the artoflivingretreatcenter.org and you can learn more about my retreat. Slots are very limited, so make sure you register as soon as possible. So now let's jump into today's episode. There is a lot of conversation around friendships circling all over the internet. Sometimes these conversations are highly focused on the negativity that is surrounded by, I would say, adult female friendships, whether it's these friendships ending or people experiencing jealousy within these friendships. But there is a particular conversation happening around rekindling old friendships. And I don't think that we have the resources that we need to really learn how to cultivate healthy adult friendships. There's a plethora of books available around how adults can navigate romantic relationships. But I think when it comes to platonic friendships, there's not as much research out there. I'm not saying there's none at all, but I think the options are very limited. And so I want to dive into this conversation because I do believe that healthy adult female friendships exist. I just think that we need a lot more tools on how to navigate the transitions that come in friendships and the ebb and flows regarding our emotions that manifest in our friendships. And I don't want everything surrounding the topic of friendship to be negative, And so I think that there is a lot of value in doing the work of being introspective and trying to navigate the type of friendships you're looking for. And in the midst of doing that, I do think that sometimes we start to think about old friendships and we start to think about those people that we may have cut off, those people that may have cut us off, and the distance that sometimes happens in our friendships as people get older and grow apart or their lives change. And as a result of that, it creates a different type of dynamic within the friendship. And I do believe that friendships are one of the most valuable relationships we can have. They provide us with support, joy, a sense of belonging, community. But sometimes even the strongest friendships can drift apart, and it's not due to toxicity. Sometimes it is, but it's not always the reason for why friendships drift apart. So I really want to talk about rekindling old friendships. Is it worth it? Why do you want to revisit a friendship? Is it worth it? Is it worth your peace? Is it worth your sanity? Why? Why rekindle something that you ended? Why dive back into something that you once experienced? And so before I dive into how to rekindle an old friendship, I think it's also important to acknowledge some of the reasons why friendships may end or even fade away in the first place. So a few common reasons that I've come across regarding why friendships may end. The first one tends to be life changes, and these are major life events. So, like moving to a new city. I saw this happen a lot during the pandemic, especially people who lived in New York City or really condensed neighborhoods. A lot of people just up and left. And a lot of their friends didn't see it coming because it wasn't necessarily something that people planned to do, but because of the pandemic and the conditions of their neighborhood, they felt it was safer to just leave. There are some people who did plan on moving, but they didn't plan on moving in 2020. Maybe they thought they were going to move in 2025. And because of the pandemic, that rushed their desire to leave. And so moving to a new city can put a strain on a relationship because now you have to do a long distance friendship, and that can be hard. Other major life events could be getting married, having children, or even changing jobs. These things can create physical and emotional distance between friends. And when our circumstances change, so do our needs. And as a result of that, sometimes friendships don't adapt to these new realities. And as a result of that, again, I don't think it's always toxic when people can't adapt to certain changes that happen in a friendship. But I do think we have to be realistic that your friend is not always going to be in the same condition when you met them. So if you meet someone when they're single and they desire partnership, that means that they are seeking to be in a romantic relationship, and that is a goal of theirs. And so their desire is not to stay single. So you should not expect your single friend to always be single. You might also have friends who don't have children that want children. And so at some point, they're going to be working toward the goal of having a kid. Same thing with our jobs. There are people who want job promotions, and there are people who want to do more at their job. And so as a result of that, when you especially step into a leadership role, your job is going to be more demanding. If you go from being a full-time employee to an entrepreneur, being an entrepreneur can be more demanding sometimes than working a full-time job. So there are going to be times where we have to adapt to the new realities that exist for people. And if you want to grow in a friendship, you have to be willing to meet people where they are. And there are times where these life changes do cause ruptures. And sometimes it can be really hard to figure out, how do we keep moving forward when so many drastic changes has happened to each person in the friendship, and it can make it harder to stay connected to the person. Another reason why friendships may end is because people grow apart. And so as we grow and evolve, our interests, values, and lifestyles can change. So I talked about that in regarding life changes. That is a part of lifestyle changes: getting married, having children, moving to a different city, changing jobs, or even changing careers, right? A lifestyle change can have a significant impact on a friendship. Sometimes this growth brings us closer to others, but it can also lead to drifting apart from those who once shared our journey. This is a natural part of life, but it can be difficult to accept. And so, again, if we want our friendships to continue to evolve, we have to be very intentional and use discernment to figure out, how do we continue to grow together versus growing apart. Another reason I find that friendships may end is because there's miscommunication or conflict. And as a result of these things, you have misunderstandings in a relationship, you have unresolved conflicts or hurt feelings, and these things can cause a rift between friends. And if these issues aren't addressed, they can fester and lead to a breakdown in the relationship. I can be reflective enough to say, most of my friendships that I've had for 10 plus years, they are still thriving because I was either willing to initiate a hard conversation, or I was willing to be on the receiving end of a hard conversation. I think as people, we don't like feeling discomfort. That is often at the root of why a lot of misunderstandings and conflicts happen, because we don't want to be uncomfortable. And so we walk on eggshells in our relationships. We are very passive or sometimes passive aggressive in our relationships, or we just swallow our words and we suppress our feelings because we don't want to be the person who is stirring up conflict. We don't want to stir up what we might call negativity. Having a hard conversation is not a form of negativity, it's reality. We have to be willing to communicate and talk about things that are difficult and hard, especially when you love someone. If you are in a partnership, you probably come across so much content that is focused on how married couples or even people who are in a relationship can work toward repair. And the number one thing you're going to come across is how to manage conflict, how to increase your communication in a romantic relationship. And it's so interesting to me that we have all of this language for romantic relationships and we normalize it. But the moment there's conflict in a friendship, the immediate response sometimes is to cut the friendship off, end the relationship altogether, and view it as a form of negativity if there's conflict in the first place. Yet we normalize it in a romantic relationship. You see how the two don't make any sense? And so I think that we need to start seeing the value in friendship and recognizing that a friendship is literally human beings coming together, and human beings have flaws. And there are going to be times where, because of the flaws that we have to be willing to have hard conversations to let the people in our relationships know how they impact us. Another common reason I see why friendships may end is because there's neglect or a lack of effort. And if you are, again, in a romantic relationship, or even if you're dating, one of the common reasons a lot of people end relationships, or they don't enter into a relationship and they don't go past the dating phase, is because there is a lack of effort from one of the parties. So if a lack of effort cannot even sustain a romantic relationship, it is not going to sustain a friendship. Friendships require time and effort to maintain. If one or both parties stop putting in the necessary effort, the friendship will slowly fade away. Sometimes this can happen unintentionally because life gets busy and there are stressful periods that we experience in life due to things like burnout, due to things like lifestyle changes. Sometimes people can experience mental health challenges. And so there can be unintentional reasons for why things can happen, but we also have to be communicating these things. Your friends can't read your mind and know that you're going through a mental health crisis. Your friends can't read your mind and recognize that you're overwhelmed. This is why communication is so important also in a friendship, because we expect these things from a partner. And so we need to be able to communicate to our friends, I'm going through something right now, and this is why it's taking me maybe a week to respond to your text messages. I'm going through a lot of stress right now, and I'm just feeling too overwhelmed to go out and do all of the social activities we're used to doing. Reciprocity is a requirement for any relationship to thrive. And when one party decides to stop reciprocating, they decide to stop putting in effort, they decide to stop being intentional about the friendship, it is going to impact the friendship. And it's not fair to act as if slowly pulling away from someone or intentionally just distancing yourself from somebody is the norm in a friendship, especially if it's a friendship you're trying to maintain. If you're not trying to maintain it, that's a different story. But if you are trying to maintain a friendship, you do have to be realistic about the role that you play in the friendship. So learn to communicate, learn to resolve conflicts, but most importantly, recognize effort is required for any relationship to thrive. Now, the last reason for why I see many friendships ending is because of toxic dynamics. So the reality is, not all friendships are healthy. Sometimes we find ourselves in friendships that are more draining than supportive. If a friendship becomes toxic, whether it's through manipulation, envy, disrespect, it's often better to step away for the sake of your mental health. And the reality is, you can't thrive in a relationship if your nervous system is constantly in a state of fight, flight, freeze, or fawn. And so if you recognize that you're in a friendship with someone and your nervous system is constantly dysregulated when you're around this person, it is going to be very hard for you to grow together with that person because you are maybe staying in that friendship for the sake of survival, and you're not necessarily thriving in that friendship. So now that I gave you some information on why some friendships end, let's talk about rekindling these old friendships. It's natural to feel a bit nostalgic when thinking about someone you used to be close with, and there can be many reasons why you might want to reconnect. Maybe you miss their company, or maybe you feel that the time and the distance have allowed both of you to grow and mature. Maybe these are the things that are coming to you. And so I want to give you some things that you should be considering before you try to rekindle an old friendship, because I do not believe that missing someone is enough of a reason to rekindle a dynamic. There are plenty of people who miss their abusers. There are plenty of people who miss being in toxic dynamics because that's all they knew. So it's natural to miss someone that was actually harmful to you, because in the midst of that relationship, there was something that you were still gaining despite the harm being caused. And so you need to be mindful enough, and you need to use enough discernment to recognize, why do I want to reconnect with this person? Because yes, I miss them, but missing them is not enough. So before you reach out to someone, these are the things I want you to consider. The first thing is you should be reflecting on the past. Before rekindling a friendship, it's important to reflect on why the friendship ended or faded in the first place. Were there unresolved conflicts? Did you grow apart due to different values or interests? Or is it because the person was unhealthy and toxic? Understanding the reasons behind the distance can help you approach the situation with clarity and prevent repeating mistakes. So it's important for you to not act on emotion alone, because emotion alone is, I miss this person. I had good times with this person. And then when you do some deeper digging, you realize that, well, we faded away because there was conflict, and that person was either passive aggressive or that person didn't really do well at dealing with the conflict. So we just stopped talking to each other. Now we want to rekindle, but what does rekindling look like if there are unresolved conflicts? Do you want to just sweep things under the rug and pretend nothing happened? Because that's not a healthy way to reapproach a relationship. And so if there are some unresolved conflicts and you're thinking about rekindling that friendship, that means you need to resolve those conflicts. Because what's going to happen when more conflict arises in the friendship? Are you just going to end the friendship again? And then as time goes on, you say to yourself, well, maybe they forgot about that thing. Let's rekindle again. That is not a healthy friendship dynamic. So make sure you're just paying attention to the reasons behind why you ended the friendship, and make sure before you do the work of rekindling, you have clarity around that situation, and you also are resolving the conflicts within that situation. Another thing that you should be doing is assessing your motivations. Why do you want to reconnect? Are you looking for closure, or do you genuinely miss the person? You miss the experiences that you had with them, and you truly want them back in your life. What do you miss about them? Why did it end in the first place? These things are paired with the information I said earlier. Why did you end the relationship in the first place? And depending on the reason why, does it matter that you miss them if that's how they treated you? Does it matter that you miss them if you recognize that every single time that you were around them, your nervous system felt uneasy? Does it matter that you miss them if they do not have the ability to literally handle conflict? Because that's what you're going to be getting back into unless they have proven to you that they have done the work of being a different person. I also think looking for closure is important to investigate, because a friendship ending, in many ways, it's closure, because the friendship is over. That person's not talking to you anymore. And that says a lot if they're making a choice not to speak to you. So what more do you want from that person? So be honest with yourself about your motivations and make sure they come from a place of positivity and growth rather than guilt or loneliness. Because sometimes we end a friendship and we know we ended it for the right reasons, but we feel guilty. And guilt means I did something bad. And a lot of us have been taught that our worthiness and our strength is attached to how much pain and trauma we can endure. I want you to understand that you have nothing to prove to yourself when it comes to being in a toxic or unhealthy friendship or even relationship. And I think we have to change this narrative by believing that the more pain I can endure, the stronger I am. And so you don't have to feel guilty for ending something if you know there are healthy reasons for why you ended it. But maybe you do feel guilty that you ended a relationship because you yourself weren't mature enough to have a healthy conversation. Maybe you yourself weren't mature enough to deal with conflict, and so you ghosted that friend. You distanced yourself from that friend, and maybe that is why the guilt does exist. Remember, I said guilt means I did something bad, and as people, we have to be real with ourselves. Sometimes we do make poor choices. And sometimes we'll reflect on those poor choices, especially as we grow and evolve. And we'll look back in time and say, Dad, like, I really acted so immature with that person. I ended that friendship in such an immature way, and I feel bad about how I did it. And I want to reconnect with this person, maybe for the purpose of apologizing, or maybe for the purpose of seeing if there is a relationship that we can come back to. So just think about that. I also just want you to assess the feeling of loneliness, because sometimes we feel that because we're lonely, that this is the person that is going to fulfill us. But remember, you experienced that person before. So do you really want to experience them again just to avoid loneliness? You have to think about the sacrifices that you're making. And there are some people who don't want to be alone so bad that they will be in a friendship and even in a romantic relationship just so that they won't be alone. And you got to remember that you're making a choice to be involved in that. And there are going to be times where you have to make a sacrifice. And sometimes that sacrifice is, in order for me to sustain my peace and my mental health, I'm going to have to disconnect from this person. And I might feel lonely for now, but that's a signal to me that I need to develop community. It's not, I need to rekindle with this person. What that means is I need to go out there and make new friends. I need to go out there and build more community. So just think about that, especially if loneliness is the motivation for why you want to reconnect with someone. Now, another thing I want you to be thinking about when it comes to rekindling old friendships is the other person's feelings. We have to remember that rekindling a friendship, it's important to remember that rekindling a friendship isn't just about you, it's about the other person too. Consider how they might feel about reconnecting. They might be eager to hear from you, or they might have moved on and want nothing to do with you. So you have to respect their feelings and be prepared for the possibility that they may not want to reconnect. As people, we are driven sometimes by our ego. And when our ego is in a driver's seat, sometimes we become entitled. And we say to ourselves, I want this friendship, so they must give it to me. And there are times where we are reconnecting with someone, and let's say harm was caused, and we're like, well, I'm going to apologize to that person. And there are times where we don't realize on a subconscious level that we are expecting that person to just simply accept the apology and move on because that's what we want. So you have to understand that if a friendship ended, it ended for both people. And just because you want to reconnect, it doesn't mean the other person is going to want to reconnect. You also have to remember that if both parties do want to reconnect, there are going to be certain things you want from that reconnection, and there are going to be certain things they want from that reconnection. There also might be that you want to reconnect and there are certain conflicts that aren't resolved that that person may not want to address that you want to address. So understand that coming back together requires the consent of both parties, and it also requires openness from both people. You can't force someone to be in a relationship with you. And so you also have to be okay with knowing that if you're going to put yourself back out there to try to reconnect with this person, you also have to be open to the possibility of that person rejecting you, because they may be comfortable with the fact that you're out of their life now and they have moved on and they don't want to rekindle at all. And you have to learn how to make peace with that and also not take it personally because the friendship ended and they have a right to make decisions that make them feel safe and comfortable the same way you have a right to make those same type of decisions. So if you are deciding to reach out to someone, I would encourage you to start slowly. A simple message or a casual meetup can be a good way to test the waters. I think it's important to just use discernment and recognize what is the best approach to take. Do you want to text your friend and say, hey, we should go on a vacation and rekindle our friendship? Probably not. but maybe you want to invite this friend out for coffee, or maybe you want to start off with a simple phone call. Rebuilding trust and connection takes time. So don't rush the process. Remember, a relationship of any kind requires consent from both parties. So just because you're eager to reconnect with someone doesn't mean that they're as eager as you are. So you need to take the time to really listen to each other and understand where each of you is in your life, and then figure out, how do you come back together? There are some times too where people are seeking to reconnect with someone, and after that first initial meetup and chatting with the person and assessing things that happened, especially around why the friendship ended, those people sometimes realize we're actually better off not being close friends. And so be willing to be wise enough to recognize if you can even move forward with this person. Sometimes we've tried to rekindle and we realize actually this isn't going to work out, or our definition of rekindling might be different. We want to be close buddies again, but we might have to start off as acquaintances. So that's important. Just remember to start slowly. The next thing you want to do is set healthy boundaries. If the old friendship had unhealthy dynamics, it's important to set clear boundaries this time around. You want to be open about what rules and requirements you want from that person, but you also need to be figuring out what are the boundaries that you are going to put in place if you are willing to put yourself back into the situation with this person. So be open about what you need and expect from the friendship, and be willing to listen to their needs as well. Remember, healthy boundaries are key to maintaining a positive and supportive relationship. The last thing I want to share with you is to be open to change. Both you and your friend have likely changed since you were last close. So be open to the fact that the friendship may look different this time around. Embrace the new dynamics and focus on building a relationship that works for who you both are now, not who you were in the past. So I hope this information was helpful. If you are considering rekindling a friendship, or you have, if you're listening on Spotify, I would love for you to leave a comment and let me know how that went for you. Remember that rekindling an old friendship can be a beautiful experience, but it's also a process that requires thoughtfulness and care. Friendships, like all relationships, evolve over time. So by approaching the situation with honesty, compassion, and a willingness to grow, you can rebuild meaningful connections that enrich your life. So thank you so much for joining me for today's episode. If this episode inspired you, please make sure to subscribe, share this episode, and leave a rating, because that helps my podcast so much. You can also connect with me on social media, visit my website, MinaaB.com, to order my book and to find other ways to stay in touch. Thank you for tuning in. Until next time. That's all for today's episode. Thank you for tuning in. If you enjoyed what you just listened to, please take a moment to rate and review this podcast on your preferred platform. Also, don't forget to share it with a friend and on social media. To stay connected with me and my work, follow me on social media and subscribe to the Mindful with Minaa newsletter, which can be found on my website, www.minaB.com. You can also continue learning from me by ordering my book, Owning Our Struggles, which is available at all major book retailers. Stay tuned for a new episode next week, and most importantly, remember to be present and stay mindful. Take care, and goodbye for now.